Now, as we said before, we will take a look at social safeguarding systems in other European countries. And now our organizers behind the curtains are going to jump into a different role. People are constantly putting on different hats. Cilgia Gadola and Elisabeth Roos, together with a few others, published a study yesterday in search of fair systems, examining social securities for artists in Europe. And they will now present us with the results of the research. I'd like to introduce both of them. Cilgia Carla Gadola worked since 2006 until 2006 as a choreographer and dancer. And she also curated for the Gallery of the Contemporary, also part of the artistic direction of a dance festival, co-founder of MICA, Movement in Contemporary Art, and since August of 2021, she has led the project System Check and Background that we also talked about at the Federal Association. She has been a member of the Speakers Circle of the Coalition of the Independent Arts since 2019. Elisabeth Roos studied cultural studies in Lüneburg, and the focus of her research was cultural city development, and she's worked for the Federal Association since 2020 and is part of System Check and Background. Previously, she worked at the Robert Bosch Foundation in Stuttgart and at Esche in Dortmund, and had a great deal of different experience with funding programs. We're very excited about the results of your research. And we'll hear about this for the next 20 to 25 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Prasanna. I hope you can hear me. Cilgia and I will tell you more about the European study and its results. The task was to take a look at different European countries and to see how artists and culture makers are socially safeguarded there. And of course, of particular interest are systems that are specifically made for these groups of professions. Are there special systems for social safeguarding for culture makers in other European countries, and what do they look like? The goal was to identify good practice examples in other European countries and find possible solutions for approaches in Germany. Since the framework of the study was limited, we were only able to take a look at a selection of European countries. And from an original pool of 10, we selected 5 countries: Belgium, Denmark, France, Austria, and Portugal. It was also unfortunately not possible for the research to look into all components, so we decided on 3 components of social safeguarding, and those are pensions provisions, unemployment, and parental leave. We broke the study down into 3 parts. First, an explorative examination and comparative analysis of the 3 components of social safeguarding in the 5 selected European countries. This part was accompanied by the sociologist Melissa Belladasme. She analyzed literature and documents for the social safeguarding system in these 5 European countries. Do these systems exist? How do they work? And then a comparison. In the second part, a qualitative interview study was created by the theater scholar Jana Prinzler and the anthropologist Dr. Jonathan Roth. Using the results of the first part in coordination with us, they created a questionnaire for the second part and conducted written interviews with representatives from these selected European countries. The goal of the second part was to evaluate the functionality of these systems and to present good practice examples. Unfortunately, we have no insights from Denmark in this part because we were unable to find an interview partner. The third part was a workshop that we put on in August of this year, where together with experts and members of the community from Germany and Europe, we discussed the results of the first two parts. A special focus here was focusing on periods where no income is earned, and we had a joint think tank with a number of experts, and in fact in 3 different think tanks we thought about possible solutions for approaches in Germany based on good practice examples from a variety of European countries. Here as well, we looked at unemployment as well as pension provisions. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. During the explorative investigation, we learned that there's at least one specific system for artists or culture makers in all 5 countries. In France and Austria, there are systems for pension provision for artists. In Belgium, Denmark, France, and Portugal, there are specific systems for times when one has no income or jobs, and these frequently include health and accident insurance. The foundation for the development of these specialist systems in all 5 countries is a special situation of artists and culture makers, looking at their specific forms and conditions of work. In all 5 countries, these systems take into account that artists and culture makers often have various forms of income and activities, but they show that there is a gap in terms of hybrid employment. The topic of becoming a parent and parental leave is underrepresented in all 5 countries, as well as in Germany. There is no special system that addresses and improves the special challenges that parents who are also culture makers face. In the interview study, we saw that these can't be transferred to country-specific systems because every system is the result of a long-term and complex development process that underlies the national foundations of Social Security. It's unfortunately not possible to take the system from Belgium and bring it one-to-one to Germany. It also became clear that in some countries there are processes to improve the social safeguarding of culture makers, and 2 exemplary projects in Belgium and in Portugal. There is an artistic status that addresses the problems involved with interim periods where one has no jobs or gigs. And Cilgia will say more about that in a moment. And another result of the interview study is that the systems examined only partially address the true working realities of the artists and culture makers and are only to make substantial improvements in part. I'll also say something about the pension provisions in France and in Austria, and then Cilgia will say more about the systems for unemployment. In France, there's a retirement system for independent artists and authors. La Sécurité sociale des artistes-auteurs. I hope I didn't pronounce that completely wrong. This system is for independent artists who work in one of the 5 disciplines, 5 following disciplines: visual art, authors and illustrators, songwriters, screenwriters, and photographers. As we see, the performing arts are not included here because in France, people who work in the performing arts are usually seen as formal employees and have no access to this Social Security program for freelancers. To become a member of the system, all you have to do is professionally pursue one of these 5 activities and prove this, and you pay contributions to it. One receives personal claims because they pay contributions that at retirement age can then be taken. And what's also possible is if you have multiple forms of income, then you can also pay into different systems and then combine them together so that you have pension provisions in old age. And that's how it is in France. In Austria, there's the Künstlersozialversicherungsfonds. It's not dissimilar to the Künstlersozialkasse in Germany. And here's how it works. Independent artists in Austria pay contributions to the state social security systems, including pension, with a maximum fee of 158 euros a month if you have a minimum income per 5,000 euros per year. And if you have that, you can get these subsidies. The prerequisites for this is that you have an artistic profession and a minimum income. It's similar to Germany, but what is different, but similar to in France, is here as well, you can pay into different retirement systems. I can work as an independent artist, but I can also be formally employed, and this won't cause one to lose one's membership in this Künstlersozialversicherungsfonds.
Und man verliert seine Mitgliedschaft nicht, wenn man unterschiedlichen Tätigkeiten nachgeht.
And now I'm going to hand things over to Cilgia. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön, Elisabeth.
I'll start off with something that was talked a great deal about yesterday and today.
Studienteilen von Bell, Adasme und Roth-Prinzloh wurde nämlich die Frage sehr besprochen und auch in
The
dem
question has been dealt with a great deal.
ob oder wann bei Kunstschaffenden von
When you can
Arbeitslosigkeit
speak
gesprochen
about
werden kann.
unemployment,
Welcher Begriff geeignet wäre.
when that term actually applies.
Ich zitiere ein kurzes Zitat von der
Here's a brief quote from one of the interviews because I think it's very helpful.
Bei selbstständigen Berufen,
With freelance work, especially in the performing arts,
werden nicht alle
not all
Arbeitstätigkeiten
kinds of
immer
work
vergütet
are
oder
financially
überhaupt
compensated or
als Arbeit
recognized as
anerkannt,
work.
so wichtig sie auch sein mögen. Aufgrund
Because
der
of these framework
Rahmenbedingungen
conditions,
vieler Förderprogramme werden
a number of funding programs
als künstlerische Arbeit im
see the
engeren
artistic
Sinne
process as
betrachtet.
rehearsals and performances.
Darüber
But
hinaus
in
werden
addition, the
Ausfallzeiten
time
zwischen den
between the
Jobs, die im
jobs
Wesentlichen
are
aus
seen
unbezahlter
as
Arbeit,
unpaid
zum
work.
Beispiel Akquise,
Getting
Netzwerken,
gigs,
bestehen,
networking,
oft als
this is often
Arbeitslosigkeit
perceived as
wahrgenommen und
unemployment.
ein weit verbreitetes Stigma und eine Abwertung der freien, der künstlerischen Arbeit.
We've heard about this aspect before, but we absolutely have to keep this in mind. If we have quote-unquote unemployment insurance, that has to be reformed. We also didn't determine a precise definition in our project, but we see that there are income gaps.
Weil im Vordergrund stehen soll, dass es sich Phasen handelt,
But
wo kein Einkommen generiert wird,
we are talking about phases where
keine
no
Arbeit
income is
oder kein
being
Auftrag
generated.
verrichtet wird bzw. vorliegt. Ich beschreibe nun
Now I'll
einzelne
describe
Aspekte
some
der
individual
vier verschiedenen
aspects
Versicherungssysteme
of
für
these
Kunstschaffende
programs
aus
in
Belgien,
Belgium,
Dänemark,
Denmark,
Frankreich und Portugal, wobei ich mich
Portugal, and France,
hauptsächlich aufgrund der
but I will
Workshop-Ergebnisse auf
primarily
Belgien und
refer to
Portugal
Belgium and
beziehen
Portugal
werde und die
thanks to the
anderen
workshop
zwei
and
Länder
only
nur ganz
briefly
kurz
deal with the
anschneide.
others.
Hier nochmal der Hinweis, dass die Studie auf unserer Webseite
Please bear in mind that the study is available for download as a PDF on our website
unter dem
in our Mediathek, just to bear that in mind.
Danach,
After I've
wenn
presented
ich
these
die Aspekte
aspects,
vorgestellt habe, werde ich anhand der Workshop-Diskussion auch hier nur
and then I'll present just a few approaches for solutions due to time constraints. So let's start with Belgium. There's a so-called artist status that has been renewed in September, a couple of months ago. It was started. It took quite some time to prepare it. The renewal intends to make it easier for the time between regular income for artists and culture makers. The status describes further measures that should make it possible for artists to have access to the same Social Security networks like those who are formally employed. For example, while protected by this insurance, it's possible to do work other than artistic work. And even if you don't bring in enough money to cover everything, you still keep some insurance protection. There's an adjustment that's made with this insurance protection that makes it possible to get started working again. Another interesting aspect of this new artist status is increased access. It doesn't only include artists, but also creative technical roles as well as creative supportive roles like production managers. These are all included now. And the argument which we've already heard here that all these jobs are subject to the same precarious employment conditions. In Denmark, there are 22 different unemployment insurance funds, and some apply to all, and some are for very specific jobs. And this is possible for freelancers as well as for those formerly employed. Singers, circus artists, musicians, songwriters. Let me move on to France. And I'll end with Portugal. We already talked about retirement provisions in France. There's also provisions made in mind for interruptions in employment. And it's integrated in the general unemployment insurance. For all disciplines that work on a project-based manner, freelance. Alongside artists, these also include technicians. In film, for example, filmmakers have demanded and developed this protection. And it's been also expanded to performing arts and audiovisual art.
Ein Kritikpunkt laut der Interviewpartnerin von Roth und Prinsloo ist der zeitlich sehr hohe Aufwand, die der Berechnung zugrunde liegenden Stunden.
Right now, it is very time-consuming to do the work necessary to receive these benefits. And now I'll continue with Portugal. In Portugal, there was already an unemployment insurance, also for freelancers. But that wasn't really an option, similar to Germany, where the option simply didn't meet the needs. This system also takes into consideration that artists have periods between jobs, but still pursue artistic activities in order to be able to continue to work in their profession, writing, training, rehearsing.
Wer Leistungen bei Arbeitslosigkeit erhält, ist nicht gezwungen, eine Arbeit außerhalb des eigenen Berufs
artists there are not forced to pursue jobs outside of their field, according to our expert in the workshop.
ist ein Wechsel ins System und wieder raus.
It's rather
scheinbar recht
uncomplicated to leave the system and then rejoin it later.
Das System soll dazu da sein, eine Aussetzung der kulturellen Aktivität zu schützen.
There is a so-called suspension of cultural activities, a possibility to stop working in the cultural field and then resume later. This was just implemented last month.
Und wir bleiben in Kontakt und
And so we'll have to keep an eye on how it actually works, this innovation. Let's talk about the few solutions for approaches for solutions that we discussed.
Also ich versuche das, ich zeige Parallelen auf.
I'll try to keep things short.
Versuchen wirklich kurz zu halten, weil es sich oftmals deckt, was uns auch bestärkt.
And tell you what we found out.
In Bezug auf eine passende Absicherung für
In terms
Kunstschaffende
of
in erwerbslosen
protection for
Arbeitsphasen,
artists, in periods
Belgien und Portugal als gute
between
Beispiele
gigs, we think that
herhalten.
Belgium and Portugal are good examples, as we've heard.
In diesen Systemen sind eben, wie
These
gesagt,
systems
auch
also
andere
allow
Tätigkeiten
other forms of
abgesichert,
work.
die unter den gleichen Bedingungen arbeiten wie KünstlerInnen. Unter
And
anderem
then
daher kam auch im Workshop der Vorschlag auf, die KSK
in
solle
the
sich
work
für
group,
weitere Berufsgruppen
the suggestion was
öffnen,
made that
sollte die
KSK should open itself up to other
Arbeitslosenversicherung
other groups
in
of
die
professions,
KSK
and
integriert
unemployment
werden.
insurance should be integrated within it.
Außerdem werden Spezifika der Arbeitsrealitäten von Kunstschaffenden anerkannt, eben dass Lösungen gefunden wurden, dass in dem Beruf weitergearbeitet
And it
werden
also
kann,
needs
auch wenn
to
zu wenig für den Lebensunterhalt
take into
oder
account
zu
that
einem gewissen
work
Zeitpunkt
within the field needs to be able to
kein
continue
Geld
even
eingenommen
if enough money isn't earned during that period.
In Bezug
In
auf
terms
einen
of better
Verbesserungsschutz im
protection in old
Alter kamen
age,
im
the
Workshop
following
zum Beispiel folgende
suggestions
Vorschläge
came.
auf.
There should be
Die Möglichkeit
possibility
für Selbstständige,
for
darüber haben wir auch schon gehört, in die Bayerische Versorgungskammer
freelancers to take out other forms of other and supplemental forms of
darauf
insurance.
sollte mehr aufmerksam gemacht werden, dass es mehr in die
There needs to be more
Kommunikation
communication about
kommt.
this.
Das ist auch zum Beispiel ein jetzt eigengestellter Auftrag an den
Yes.
BFDK.
Might also be an appeal for the Federal Association of the Performing Arts.
Dann kam die Idee auf,
And there's
der
also the
Vorschlag
need
oder der Bedarf, dass auch wenn es, auch hier wieder, wenn das
that if
in der KSK
one
bleibt oder wenn wir da
remains in the KSK or new groups come in,
dass
but
dann
also
eben auch
those who
die
don't
nicht
work
künstlichen
artistically
Tätigkeiten,
can also
Rentenrückkehr durch diese Tätigkeit
have these claims for old age
aufgebaut werden sollten.
provisions,
Also wie das zum Beispiel jetzt ist
even
bei
if they don't work directly
Vorschlag.
artistically, like
Weil
technicians.
wenn quasi nur die künstlerischen Einkommen
or
in der
production
KSK zählen und
managers.
die dann in die Rentenversicherung gehen, dann ist es halt einfach nur ein Teil und reicht sowieso nicht aus. Dann, das hatten wir gestern im Workshop auch
We
diskutiert.
talked about
kam
this
es,
also in the
nicht
workshop.
so hier groß vor. Die Voraussetzung für
We should also adjust the prerequisites to have a justifiable claim for a basic retirement provision.
Auch schon öfter gehört an anderen Stellen.
And of course here,
auch hier bei der Vorsorge fürs Alter, aber auch in die anderen Phasen, in denen kein Gewinn generiert wird.
and of
die
course here
Anhebung
as
der
well,
Honorare
the
und
fees
Gehälter.
and salaries need to be raised. There are 5 aspects
5
that I'd like to
Aspekte, die ich
summarize
nochmal zusammenfasse, auf die Antworten gefunden werden müssen,
for
wenn
times when we
neue
develop
Modelle
new
entwickelt
models.
werden.
Who has access to the
Erstens, wer hat
services
Zugang
and
zu
under
den
what conditions?
Leistungen und unter welchen Bedingungen?
How is the insurance
Zweitens, wie wird die
financed? By
Versicherung
whom?
finanziert? Wie viel durch wen? Heute auch schon gehört. Drittens, die Leistungen bei Altersvorsorge und Erwerbslosigkeit
And of course the pension
müssen für den
provisions
Lebensunterhalt reichen,
and unemployment insurance
bei
have to
den
be enough money to
Anlehnungen
live
an
on.
Empfehlungen der Sparten. Viertens,
The continuity of
der
artistic
künstlerischen
work in
Arbeit
phases
in Phasen, in denen
where
die
these services are
Leistungen
needed
benötigt
has to be
und
insured.
erhalten werden, muss
And,
gewährleistet sein.
fifth and finally,
Und fünftens, soll es eine Versicherung in Erwerbslosigkeit
if there is,
spezifisch für Kunstschaffende
should there be
geben?
unemployment insurance
Oder
specifically for
soll deren
artists?
Bedarfe in die Reform
Or
der aktuellen
should this be
Arbeitslosenversicherung für
integrated
Selbstständige
in general within the unemployment
allgemein
insurance for
entwickelt werden?
freelancers?
Auch
There's
das
been a great deal of
explizit in
discussion
heute,
about
was in
this.
den Workshops auch gesagt wurde, sollte es zu einer Versicherung spezifisch für Kunstschaffende
If there
kommen,
were an insurance
würde
specifically
sich
for
die Frage
artists, the
stellen,
question would be
ob dieses fehlende Element der Versicherung in die
whether
KSK aufgenommen
this should
werden
be
kann
taken
oder
up
soll.
within the
Diese
KSK.
Variante würde die Aufgabe allerdings nicht ersetzen, eine neu aufgelegte Arbeitslosenversicherung für Selbstständige so zu gestalten,
But there's
dass
still, of course, also the need
auch
for
davon
a possible
profitieren
new
können.
system to be made so that artists actually profit from it, which wouldn't need to be made over the
Elisabeth hat es auch
KSK.
schon gesagt,
It's-
es ist nicht möglich, das 1:1
As we said, these programs from other countries aren't possible to implement one-to-one, but we found it very helpful to hear what they've talked about, what they've thought about, how they've discussed things, and what has been
Es
developed,
eröffnet auf jeden Fall
and to look more
Möglichkeiten, da
precisely at
genauer
other
hinzugucken
options
und sich dann auch natürlich mit
as well as
Expertinnen
to
hier
discuss
so
with experts here.
auszutauschen, also mit
Um,
Rentenversicherung,
people, when
Ökonominnen,
talking
wie
about retirement insurance, talking with
das mit
economists, for
dem
example,
aktuellen
can be
Sozialversicherungsrecht
helpful to
einfach
hear about how
anwenden
this works with
kann.
labor law.
Und somit
And so
beenden wir hier die
we'll
Diskussion
end the
darüber und
discussion
freuen
right
uns
here
auf weiteren
and
Gespräche
look
auch
forward
dazu.
to further discussion.
Vielen Dank für
Thank you
Ihre
very
Aufmerksamkeit.
much for your attention.